Mr. President, I would ask that you dispense with the calling of the
Without
roll.
objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, I would like to rise and speak in support of the Minimum Wage Fairness Act. Mr. President, I am strongly in support of the Minimum Wage Fairness Act. The minimum wage, first instituted in 1938, has served as a key way to protect workers in our economy, ensuring that they're able to earn enough money to provide the basic living necessities. However, the current federal minimum wage, set at $7.25 an hour, fails to do that. The federal minimum wage has not been increased since 2009. Today, an individual who works 40 hours per week, 52 weeks a year at the federal minimum wage earns $15,080 per year. And this is nearly $5,000 below the federal poverty level for a family of three, and almost $9,000 below the poverty level for a family of four. This means that we have hardworking Americans who put in full-time work every week for the entire year, yet still live in poverty, and this is unacceptable. If we fail to act, the federal poverty level will rise with inflation while the minimum wage will not. As a result, families earning $7.25 per hour will continue to fall further and further below the poverty line. The value of the minimum wage peaked in 1968 and is now much lower due to inflation. If the minimum wage had kept pace with inflation, it would currently pay $10.74 per hour. While the value of the minimum wage has been on the decline, worker productivity has been on the rise, and that is a disconnect. Increased productivity usually means that there is increased wages reflecting that productivity. That's not the case with the minimum wage. If the minimum wage had increased with rising productivity, it would be worth over $21 per hour today, yet the minimum wage still stays stuck at $7.25. If we were paying workers based on the 1968 level, it would be much higher. If we were paying wages based on the productivity, their ability to do the job, it would be exceptionally higher. This bill, the bill before us, or will come shortly before us, will increase the minimum wage in 3 installments until it reaches $10.10 per hour, and then tie the federal minimum wage to inflation. This would ensure that the value of minimum wage will not be eroded over time as it has been. The bill will also increase the minimum wage for tip workers, whose minimum wage has been fixed at $2.13 for over 2 decades. And I must salute the presiding officer, the President pro tem, for his insistence that this provision be included within the minimum wage bill. Over 3.5 million Americans currently work at or below the current minimum wage, and there are millions more who work just above it. Raising the minimum wage would therefore increase the wages of everyone making the current minimum wage up until the $10.10 mark. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that 16.5 million Americans would see their wages increased by this legislation. And the Council of Economic Advisors estimates that 28 million people would benefit from the wage increase. According to researchers at MIT, a Rhode Island worker supporting a family of four would need to earn $19.17 per hour to have a living wage, a wage in which he can adequately, or she can adequately support their family. Yet the current minimum wage lags woefully behind, putting many working families in dire financial straits. The Economic Policy Institute estimates that raising the federal minimum wage to $10.10 per hour, I would point out that our minimum wage in Rhode Island is $8.80. It's higher than the minimum wage. But if we raised it to this proposed federal level of $10.10, we would give over 90,000 Rhode Islanders a raise. And it would immediately translate to economic activity in Rhode Island. And would immediately translate into growth in Rhode Island. That raise would be affecting almost 20% of our workforce. This is a critical way in order to give families the ability to support themselves, increase economic growth, and also significantly begin to bring together workers at every level. We've seen extraordinary gains at the top level. We've seen stagnation at the middle level and the low levels. We've got to start bringing ourselves together rather than pulling ourselves apart. Providing a raise to these rural workers would estimate approximately 40,000 children in these families. And over 3 years, the Economic Policy Institute estimates that this will cause the Rhode Island economy to grow by $77 million and support 300 additional jobs. We're talking about economic growth as well as fairness to working Americans. So the benefits of raising the minimum wage are vast, both in my state and across this country. According to the CBO, this legislation would lift an estimated 900,000 people out of poverty. It also helps low and middle income families who have been struggling in this economy. This would have a huge impact and a positive impact across the country. Increasing the minimum wage is especially important to women who disproportionately work minimum wage jobs. 55% of all minimum wage workers are women, including over 70% of the tipped workers. And again, thanks to the efforts of the presiding officer, we're focusing on this issue of the tipped worker and their minimum wage. While some have suggested otherwise, this legislation is also good for business. Studies show that higher wages allow businesses to save money because they have less turnover and lower training costs, which leads to increase in worker productivity that helps business succeed. An increased minimum wage can also help our nation's small businesses compete. It forces the big box stores to pay wages that are comparable to those paid by many small businesses, which levels the playing field in the marketplace. Finally, this bill will save billions of dollars in the federal budget. By raising the minimum wage to $10.10, federal need-based programs would have fewer enrollees, and the cost of these programs will drop significantly. Researchers at the Brookings Institution estimate that increasing the minimum wage to $10.10 will save at least $11 billion annually in the federal budget. And these savings come both from the lower cost of federal programs and increased revenues from taxing a higher base salary. Now, some critics have suggested that increasing the minimum wage only helps teenagers. But in fact, the average age of individuals who would benefit from this legislation is 35 years old. Nationally, over 84% of those directly affected by this legislation are at least 20 years old, and nearly half are at least 30. And in my state, according to the estimates by the Economic Policy Institute, 77% of workers that would see a raise under this bill are at least 20 years old. So this is not the high school student, part-time, a few hours a week, getting the minimum wage. These are people who are, on average, 30 years or more, who are working and struggling, not only for themselves, but in many cases for their families. So this bill is something that's beneficial to workers throughout this country. Opponents of the minimum wage have also argued that increasing the minimum wage will decrease jobs, citing a recent CBO report. However, the CBO report was generated without any new analysis on the part of the CBO, and their estimates are stated with a great deal of uncertainty. In fact, the CBO's own numbers suggest that there is a 16% chance that increasing the minimum wage to $10.10 would actually increase employment. Economists at Goldman Sachs and at the Brookings Institution say that the CBO report overstates the likely negative impact on jobs. Further, over 600 economists, including 7 Nobel Prize winners, sent a letter to President Obama and congressional leaders urging them to support this bill, saying that, quote, "The weight of evidence now shows that increases in the minimum wage have had little or no negative effect on the employment of minimum wage workers, even during times of weakness in the labor market." They go on to add that it could help stimulate the economy, as higher wages will lead to increased consumer demand and spending. The most recent research suggests, rather than having job losses, this will contribute to a growing economy. Mr. President, the benefits of raising the minimum wage are immense for families, workers, and the economy as a whole. And I urge my colleagues to support this important legislation to help restore the minimum wage as a safeguard for workers and families in this country.